Started in 1997 and I was kicked out in 2011. I was on the camera crew from its inception. This was the biggest church in the area and had a huge budget. And then John Lindell, not Lindell, as everybody keeps saying on the internet, it's Lindell. I know him personally. And anyway, he hired a guy named Mike Messner. And John Lindell called Mike Messner the Sammy Sosa of executive pastors. That was weird, because I used to work at the Assemblies of God headquarters at the same time I attended James River Church. And the Assemblies of God headquarters in Springfield, Missouri was in the big blue Vatican that everybody called it, because they made a reference to the cult of Islam, so it's the cult of Assemblies of God. So Mike Messner got booted out of the Assemblies of God headquarters for I think he was cheating with money. But John Lindell hired him to be the executive pastor, and things went bad really quickly. Mike Messner immediately jumped on Jay Reisner, a long-term favorite children's pastor who's a wonderful man. And he got so disgusted with Mike Messner demanding that Jay just give him a report before he does anything and write everything out to see if it could be approved. And Jay's like, I've been doing this for years. I don't need your approval. So he left. He thought he was going to be at James River for his whole life. Nope. Mike Messner forced Jay Reisner out. Then about that time, it was the 10-year anniversary of James River Church. As a writer, I was going to just write the 10-year anniversary history, and I started getting some facts from the original founding members, Roger Gadd, and some other people that were founding members before John Lindell, Dave Damascus, and Carol, his wife. They were founding members, and I knew them from Sunday school, so I asked them, hey, I was going to get some interviews in for a story about the founding of James River and how it started. And they said, oh, no. Did you ask John Lindell? Did you get his permission? Ooh. And I said, I was going to let him know after I got a bunch of stuff already written so that I wouldn't have to do all this legwork and ask him from scratch. And like, no. You've got to ask John Lindell. He's the leader. Anyway, what led to my demise was they questioned my integrity, and I was doing things I shouldn't online. I was talking to women, sexually explicit conversations online, so I admit that. And I went to a program called Living Free to get help with sexual purity issues, and I was going through that whole thing. But they still didn't trust me, and they still just couldn't forgive. And even though I'd gone through the program, I just wasn't mended the way they thought I could be, and I wasn't fixed and repaired perfectly. One of the women in the choir, I was on the camera crew, so I was on the stage camera. They had 4 cameras. A woman in the choir thought I looked at her, like raised my eyebrows at her. They called me in behind the scenes and closed the door.
We need to talk!
Jeff Neeney was the director. He works for Convoy of Hope, but they made him have to be the guy that tells me I'm not on the team anymore. I got to be suspended from camera work. And then later I was just like, why don't you just have the husband and this woman, because I didn't know who it was at the time, in the choir, why don't you just have them? My wife was in the choir too. Why don't you just have them sit down with my wife and I, and we can work this out?
What's this all about?
No, the counselor's like, well, they can't do that. So all of a sudden, the powers that be had it orchestrated differently. And no, they didn't need a meeting for the woman. Then they came back and told me, well, that choir lady, she just had a bad experience with some men in the past, so she wasn't sure what your motives were. In fact, that's the very reason they gave me. A couple years later at kids camp, I've got 4 sons, and one of them was at children's camp. I go to all the camps with the kids, help them out at James River camps, and I was faithful and working in the camps. And all of a sudden, they pull me aside at camp, and they say, we're just not sure of your motives. We're going to have a team member drive you back to home. So on the way back to the church, I told the guy, it's like Tim Keene. That's the problem. And Tim Keene was John Lindell's father-in-law. Debbie Lindell is John Lindell's wife. So her dad, Tim Keene, was one of the pastor team members. He had asked me in a counseling session with my wife, why don't you just become a prostitute? Because he'd heard about me contacting these women with anonymous chat rooms. And, well, I found that to be very offensive and an inappropriate question for a pastor to ask me. So I told about that. Well, when I told that to the team member, all of a sudden they sent me a letter. I didn't know because I was living a different place. I was going through a divorce and things were hard. And I had a P.O. box, and apparently I didn't get my mail, but the letter said I was kicked out of the church and couldn't come back. So I came back. I didn't know. I didn't get the letter. I tried to get my kid into the children's area, and my ID scanner didn't work. So I'd been removed from the system. And that's how I found out. My friend Kurt Parsley, who I went to Evangel College with, who's still on the executive team. He's a lawyer who has turned into a hitman for the James River Gestapo. And he's their executive guy that tells people bad news. So he told me, John, you didn't get your letter? We had a board meeting and you're kicked out. You're not. You're not a member anymore. I was actually a member, and I was in tithing status, and they kicked me out with a letter. I said, no, I never got it. So I said, that's why your code doesn't work on the kids area, and you're not allowed to come back. But your kids can come back, just like my friend Rahela Petyan, who was kicked out on Mother's Day this year, 2024, for disagreeing with something of John Lindell. So because she disagreed with him, she got kicked out after 18 years of faithful membership, and all her kids were there. All 5 kids were there watching her getting kicked out and pushed around by sheriff's deputies, and they said they'd have to put her in handcuffs if she came back. Stuff like that happens. So that's James River Church for you. I talked to my friend Christina Tunzing. She's on the school board in Ozark, Missouri, and she's all mad about, or not all mad, but just all like, why did you do all this stuff, and why do you write about James River? In my blog, I write about this stuff at Christian County Trumpet, so you can check that out, christiancountytrumpet.com. I wrote about being at Evangel. I wrote about what some people said there. I wrote about working at the Assemblies of God headquarters. I wrote about my time at James River Church and how I got kicked out, and I explained I did things that I shouldn't do. That's why I'm not perfect, and so there's lots of things about me that aren't perfect. I'm still not perfect, but I still love God, and I still follow Jesus, and I still go to church somewhere else. That's what makes it cool, is that I'm not bitter about church, and I'm not bitter about Christianity or the Bible. I still believe all those things. It's just John Lindell is a schmuck, and he's arrogant, and he's proud. So my friend Christina just couldn't get her head around that, and I said, well, it's a cult, and she just didn't like that. And another friend of mine that's been there for many years said, well, I've known John Lindell since the 80s. Well, so what? The length of time you know, man, doesn't have anything to do with the fact that he used to tell the truth. He used to speak the truth when I was there in the early 2000s, and now he is a false prophet. He's changed his tunes. He's gone to Bill Johnson. He does a lot of heretical things, anti-biblical things. He's proud, he's arrogant, and he's above reproach. He cannot be criticized. That's a cult leader.